we're going to be using ECS. So we're going to be using, I think this is wrong actually. It's supposed to be ECS, not ESE. So it's ECS. So it's ECS, okay? So that's what we're going to be building today. And honestly, ECS on its own, it's nice. It depends on how you look at it. But we're going to be looking at Elastic Container Service from AWS. But you will not appreciate Elastic Container Service if you don't understand Docker to some extent, right? So there's still one missing diagram here. Let me just bring that in. So I'm just going to bring Docker here, drag it up here, and then zoom my diagram a bit, push this up here but here I'll call it a Docker registry, okay? I'm not going to call it a Docker container. I'll just call it a Docker registry because there's no way you can work with a container without pulling it from a registry, whether it's ECR or Git, or maybe like a Docker hub, right? So it means you have a registry, and that registry in this case is going to be tied to a task definition. So that's what I'm going to use. So I'm just going to drag the task definition to the registry. Okay, cool. Just delete this and drag it again. Okay. Good. You need to know about ECS is just a container. It's a container service. Somebody mentioned Kubernetes. Kubernetes is also an option for you to use, but it's like an overkill for what we want to do. Okay, I'll show Kubernetes at some point, but for now, let's continue to take it easy. The two things. Let me just tell you how you master ECS, just in a nutshell. Okay, so I'm just going to move a bit and just put this here and say ECS. Right. So I'm just going to do ECS. So it's actually Elastic. Because let's build with understanding. So it's Elastic Container Service, right? Container service. So the whole idea is just that you have like a what do you call it? You have like a container. You want to run it in the cloud, and you don't want to pretty much do everything from scratch, and you want to rely on the service that already exists. That's where ECS comes in. Okay, the component of ECS, there are three things. Okay, if you understand it, honestly, you will not struggle with ECS. It has a concept of a service. A service is usually something that is a service. Maybe your webhook service, your API. It depends on what that service is. Like a service is just basically something you're trying to expose to the outward. Maybe it's like the booking service, or it's like your check-in service, whatever you name it. All right. In this case, it's our CMS service we're going to be exposing. But again, a service will need a task. Okay. So a service will need a task. So the thing is, you build a service, and whenever a service needs to run, it needs a task to run, right? A task is really more or less like a definition that says what the service needs to run. So more or less like it gives there are a lot of details there in terms of like which container is the service going to run on, which port is it going to be exposed on, which secret does it need. There's a lot of information that the task itself needs for it to run, okay? But the service will orchestrate. So the thing is, within a service, you have multiple tasks. So there'll be so many tasks. So let's duplicate this. I'm going to put 3. In the example, we have 2, but I'm going to put 3 here. So a service will have multiple tasks, right? It will have multiple tasks. So you can have task 1, you can have another task, you can have this task. So a service can actually split between those tasks. So if those tasks that I just showed you are actually backing that service, yeah, every time the service is up, any of those tasks can actually handle the traffic on behalf of the service. But one thing that binds all the service together, all the tasks together, is a task definition. And that's where you put the definition. You don't put the definition on each task. Rather, you put it in a definition. And if you followed me before, where we've worked with auto-scaling group, you will notice that there are times where we've had to do launch templates, right? You say, this is a template that I need for me to spawn up a new machine. It's the same here. You're saying, this is a task definition that I need to spawn my task. And that's why you saw there is like a something that joins them together. So here there's going to be a task definition. And honestly, we're going to build. I'm just trying to explain further so that you're not just building and you're not sure what you're building. Okay, so we'll do a task definition here. And then once we have a task definition, we can actually link all these things to a task definition. All of them will share a particular task definition that decides how a task is brought up. Okay, so honestly, this is it at a nutshell. If you ever think of ECS, the only thing I'm just going to add is now, how do you deploy ECS? You can choose your deployment model. Okay, you will see it in the account, but there is Fargate. Okay, so there's the Fargate model. Let me see. There is Fargate. So you can either choose to go the Fargate route, or you can go the EC2 route. So EC2 offering, okay? So we're going to do EC2. Cool. We'll do EC2 here. So the difference is that you can, if you have a ECS, you can choose either of these routes. It's either you go Fargate. Fargate just means, honestly, it's complete. That's really the definition of serverless in this case, in the sense that AWS is going to take care of everything for you. You just put your definition, define your service, define your task, create a task definition. And then if you need compute to run that workload, Fargate is just going to launch those compute, right? That's one offering. So if you're ever thinking of, I know most of you know Lambda as a serverless offering, but Fargate, whenever you hear Fargate, just know it's serverless in the sense that you want to run a container, but you don't really care about the compute it is running. AWS should just figure it out. So AWS is going to launch the compute, set it up for you, and then your container is running. But there's also another option. If you actually want to go the route of you setting up your own machine, I think this diagram is, let me just delete this completely. But if you also want to go the route where AWS is actually, you want to be responsible for managing your machine, setting up the AMI how you want it, you can go the EC2 route. Okay. So what you see on the right is a summary of ECS. Okay. In the sense that is an elastic container service that helps you run containers in AWS. And it starts with a service. A service will call numerous stuff. It can be powered by a number of tasks. And those tasks actually have a definition that says, how do I bring up a task? Which container am I using? Which secret am I going to mount? Which file am I going to also be mounting, right? So many definitions can go with a task. If you understand Docker, you can relate, because you know that if you're trying to do Docker run, there's a number of things you have to do. So it's the same, because ECS is just orchestrating that for you. And I said there are two options for you to host. So that you can choose to host via Fargate, or you can choose to host your own EC2 machine yourself, right? So we've done that. Now, when you look at what is on the right, it's summarized version of like ECS. The question is, how do we now build something reasonably with it, right? And that's what you see on the left. We have an ECS cluster. In there, there's going to be a service. In this case, we're just going to be working with one service. But ECS, you can have multiple services that are talking to themselves. But here, for this practical, we're going to build one service. Behind that service, we'll work with one task, right? But you can have multiple tasks. And then it will have a task definition that decides how the container is built, where it's pulled from. And that's why you see that is the one that is connecting to the Docker registry. Once that is done, the task will need to talk to the database, right? So we'll create a database for that. And then the database, at some point, we need credentials, right? We want that credential to be stored in Secrets Manager. So we also do that. And then once that is done, you want to expose that traffic, that whole ECS, beautiful ECS, to the internet. That's where you bring in a load balancer. So a load balancer, you create a target group, you point that target group to a service, and that service is going to fill that target group with IP addresses that the load balancer can reach, right? And from there, you can actually now add a different layer on top of it, which is CloudFront, right? Your global CDN. You can put CloudFront in front of it. The other things are really security. You can add WAF, Web Application Firewall, in front of CloudFront, just to make sure you can, track whatever is coming in, block traffic if you want to. And then there is obviously Certificate Manager. If you host this behind www.test.com, you pretty much want to buy a certificate for it. And that certificate would be on your CloudFront. It will also be on your load balancer. Okay, so this is the architecture, and then we're just going to start building. Okay, we will build this. The only thing is we'll stop at ALB. We will not get to CloudFront, because if you followed me, we've done CloudFront like a lot of times. So we're just going to do from the ALB part up till the Aurora. So we'll take it from the, we'll build all the ECS service, and then we'll move down to like setting up a database that it connects to. Okay, please, if you are joining, don't leave. We have to build this together. Okay, so how do we start? It depends. Honestly, it depends. And this is where you need to understand your diagram. You need to understand your diagram very well. You need to know the things you can set up on their own. Like, you don't need, there's some things you can basically set them like separately and then bring them together. That's how I think about building. And that's why you have to be a builder, such that you don't need to follow a pattern, right? You don't need to say, oh, I have to go create the ALB first, create this. No, sometimes you can actually create them in isolation. And then because you have a diagram you're following, you know exactly where you need to connect them together. So in this case, we will go with any order we want to. Maybe I want to set up the database first because I feel, or I won't set up the database because I actually want to see you set up a task that is going to fail trying to connect to the database, and then we'll go together and fix it, okay? So what we will do is that let's set up ECS, because this class is really more about showing you how quickly you can just launch your container service on ECS. So let's start with ECS. So we are going to build what is in the middle, which is like the ECS, the service, the task, and the task definition, okay? We're going to build that first, then we can add all the underlying layers at the end of the day. Okay, cool. So what we need basically is we first need, so I'm just going to go to Elastic Container Service, like you see. Where do we start from? We basically will have to start from creating a task definition, right? If you see that diagram that I shared, it had a task definition. A service will launch a task. That task is going to use a task definition. So I think that's a good place to start from, okay? But before that, let's set up some IAM roles. You know that in AWS, everything is really IAM role control. Like everything is IAM control. So you want your tasks to have like the permission to do whatever you want them to do. So we're going to be creating a task. So I'm going to go to IAM. We'll start from here. I'll go to IAM, I'll go to roles, and I'll create a new role. I'll call it, in this case, I'm actually going to use a custom policy, okay? I already have it somewhere. I'm just going to paste it here. So that's where we're going to start. So what am I doing here? I'm basically saying I need a role that is going to be assumed by ECS task, so it's basic assume role. I'm saying ECS task is going to assume this, right? The ECS service. I'm going to do next. For permissions, I'm going to use a custom permission, so I can do next. I don't want to use that. So I'll call it, let me just do ECS task execution role. So ECS task execution role. And then here, I'm just going to say, ECS task execution role. Okay, cool. So we'll do this. And then it has this trust policy. I'm just going to create a role. So I'm just going to search for the role we just created. So ECS task execution role is here. I'm just going to add a permission. All these things are things also I've discussed, like inline policies, what they mean, attaching manage policies, and what they also mean. So in this case, we're just going to create an inline policy. I'm also going to copy, I'm going to paste the JSON, but I'm going to explain exactly what it is, okay? So I'm just going to paste the JSON that I have. But it's basic stuff. At some point, I know that my task definitions will need to write stuff to the logs, to CloudWatch logs. So I'm giving it permission, okay? Here, I'm giving it permission. I also know it will need, at some point, to mount secrets because we're going to connect to the database. So I'm also giving it that permission, at the beginning. I also know that at some point, maybe I need to read something from parameter store. I'm also giving it that permission. Because this class, we're not going to touch EFS, I'm just going to take this out, okay? So that it's not confusing. But this is really the 3 permissions that I need. So logs, secret manager, and that's it. I'm just going to go next. I'm going to call it ECS task execution role. Sometimes it's good to name things properly because when you now have a lot of them, it's sometimes confusing. You don't know exactly what something was created for. So we have the EC2 task execution role, and then we have EC2 task execution role policy. Good. So the next thing I really want to search for is do ghost CMS Docker, okay? The thing is that every time you want to host a service, an ECS service, for example, it's going to be powered by Docker. The only difference here is that we're using a public repo called docker.com, like Docker Hub, right? You can also use ECR. I did abstract that. So if you go back to the diagram, you notice that I did not really put ECR, right? You can use any container registry of your choice. The point is we really want to just launch a container service. So you have to understand, sometimes you can also be the one building this image, but here we're not building our own image. We're using the image that already exists. This is a CMS, okay? And that's really what we're going to be using. We'll look at it and we'll see one of the most important thing I'm going to look at, although I have like the finished version, but one thing you need to know about is that it has like, the image you're going to use, the port is 2368. That's really the port, the service itself, the Docker image, the Ghost image is going to run on. But the most important things are really, it needs a database client, MySQL, it needs a host, it needs a user. These are all environment variables. Honestly, if you know Docker, if you've done Docker with me at some point, you know that this is basic things. You need to, if you have a container running, sometimes it needs an environment variable for it to run correctly, right? So in this case, it needs like a user, a password, a database, right? And sometimes you need to mount volumes. In this case, we're not going to go that, we won't create a volume here. They have like a DB that they are doing. So this is like a Docker compose file that you can just run locally if you wanted. But in our own case, we're just using ECS to do the same thing, okay? So the next thing we're actually going to do is that we are going to see, so we basically want to run this container. That's really where we want to start from. But again, think about it. We've set up a task role just now, like a role for ECS. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is that we want to set up a task definition, because if our service is going to run, it's going to execute, it's going to use a task. behind the scene, a task will need a definition to be able to bring itself up. And that's where the definitions come in. Things like, which container am I going to bring up? Which port is going to be exposed? Which environment variables do I need to include as part of that service? So what we're going to do is that we're going to go to here and we'll say task definition. So we'll create task definition. We'll create one. We'll be very specific. So I'm just going to use Ghost here because that's really the this is what I was talking about, right? So the launch type in this case is where you're asking questions. You can see serverless compute for containers. Let me try and zoom this a bit just so that you can see properly. But the thing is that you can now choose your launch type. If you really want AWS to handle everything from you, you can use Go Fargate. You can do Fargate. You can also use managed instances. And then you can also do Amazon EC2 instances, right? In this case, we're going to use Fargate just to make it very easy to. For architecture, we'll just use Linux x86. For our CPU, we'll use the barest minimum, okay? We don't need to use too many CPU. But this is, we creating a task definition. A task definition is really what a task need to bring itself up, right? So it means it will use this definition to bring up a task. So we're doing 5 vCPU, 1 GB of RAM. I think we also need to create another role. And there's a reason I'm creating both of them so that you know the difference. When your tasks run, at some point, they will need a permission to run based on, right? Which is what we are also going to create. So we'll also create one. And instead of, I think the first one we created was ECS task execution role, but we're going to create another one. We'll just call it ECS task role. So I'm just going to do custom. And then we'll use the same identity that we used before. We're just going to paste it here. The most important thing is that ECS task is what is going to use it. And then we'll do next. We don't need to put any permission there. We're just going to do next. And then we'll call it ECS task. The first one was execution role, but this one is going to be a task role. Right? So ECS ECS task role. Okay. And then we've given it identity. I'm just going to create the role. So once we have that, I think there is a part that is missing. So if you think about the diagram that we drew, all this thing is not going to happen without a VPC. We need a VPC. So I know I did tell you, you could go in different order, but if you think about the diagram, all these things, we needed them to be inside a VPC. So I think we're missing the component of a VPC. But again, trust me, we cannot be creating VPC in this class. Else we're going to stay here for 12 hours, okay? I will just go to Terraform. Let me see if I can actually open my IDE and see which of this one, So what I'm going to do is go to this service here, this one. So I'm going to go to this repo, copy path. I'm just going to cd in there, right? What I'm going to show you is very simple. So if you see it, basic VPC. So I'm creating a service VPC. Let me also zoom this in a bit so that you can see it. Here, I'm just going to use Terraform just because I don't really want to go through the stress of creating VPC, right? We're creating a VPC. We're giving it a private subnet, a public subnet. We're creating a NAT gateway, right? Just to allow the things that are in the private subnet, we want them to be able to go to the internet. We're saying enable DNS support. That's all we need. We just want a VPC for our work, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do Terraform apply, okay? Please, if this part is still strange to you, what is he asking me? I think am I in the wrong place or what? This shouldn't ask me for. Okay, yeah, it's actually just saying it's going to create 23 resources. Do you want to perform this action? Just know this is only creating a VPC. Every other time we're going to do it in the console, but for this, I really want a VPC to start with. Okay, so I'm going to do yes. So it's creating a VPC. It's going to create a brand new VPC for me. So let's give it some time. The point is that if you go back to the diagram, we actually need a VPC for all the things we're doing. Okay, so the things we're going to be launching, we need a VPC to put them. That's how you can control what should be private, what should be public. So we actually need one. So let's see if it's creating. It's actually creating. If you actually go back here, you will see that we now have a VPC being created. It's a service VPC. It will have a public subnet. So you can see this is the one we are launching using infra as code. It has like service public, service private. So 2 private subnets. So it's highly available. 2 public subnet, 2 private subnet. It will have a NAT gateway to be for the private subnet to be able to go to the internet. So this answers the question of who was asking NAT gateway. Here we're abstracting it because we can't be going through the details here. It's going to make the class too bulky. Okay, good. So once we have the VPC already been set up with Terraform, that's the beauty of it. Let's let it do its thing. The next thing we want to go is we're still trying to create a task definition. So here I'm just going to do for the task role itself. For the task definition, we know that we need a task role, right? So we need a task role. Let me just confirm. Let let's see. Okay, so we created two. So we need like a task role, and we created also the task execution role. So what we did, we gave it this one a task role, and then this is where we now specify the task execution role. So you can see there are two types of role. One is exactly when the service is running. Sometimes the service is running. I didn't really say that in the diagram, but if you go back to our diagram, you see that here we're only talking about the service running, but we didn't talk about if the service needed to write something to S3, or if the service needed to talk to DynamoDB. We didn't really put all that, right? So sometimes the task itself needs a permission to do that, and that's the task role. But the ECS itself needs an execution role, in terms of like mounting secrets, doing stuff that it's all ECS related. So when we are creating the task definition, we've said the task role is the one we created, and then the task execution role is this one, right? Good. Once we have that, the other things, task placement, we don't really care because it's Fargate in this case. But this is where we now begin to choose our container. So we'll say we want a Ghost container, okay? And then the URL will just be, I'll just use Ghost, right? In this case, it's going to go to Docker Hub and bring the latest Ghost image, right? So here you can be more specific. You can put like an image and a version, but here I'm just using the Ghost container, okay? The port is where I need to think about the port. So if I go back to the diagram here, I know that Ghost is going to be running on 2368. Okay, we're using a publicly known container just so that it's not magic. It's not something that we're creating ourselves. We're actually using something that is already live. So what we're going to do is the container port is here. The protocol is TCP. We'll just call it whatever we want to call it if you want to name it. And then the app protocol itself is HTTP. And we've added that mapping. Here you can do limits, right? So Docker also, if you understand, there is like you can request, you can also set limits that the task cannot, go beyond, right? Just to create like a ceiling. But we'll leave that. For environment variables, we saw that we needed a couple of environment variables, right? But for now, I'm just going to leave those environment variables and see what is going to happen. Okay, so we're going to leave all those environment variables, and then we'll continue. So it says from file. What else? This one, I really need you to set it, use log collection, which means it's going to send logs to CloudWatch so that we can see what's happening within the task, if it's failing or something is going wrong, right? Restart policy, you can set, health check. Many of these things, I'm going to leave them as the default, right? Ephemeral storage, I'm also going to leave it. I don't need, you see, ECS is really complex. You can go as far as you want in ECS. You can also, do the BRS minimum. In this case, we're just going to keep it very simple, okay? You can mount volumes, you can use volumes, but in this case, we're not going to do that. Monitoring, you can set up monitoring if you want to do trace collection and all that. So let's just go create, okay? We'll just create. So remember, we've just created a task definition. The task definition is really what a task will now use. So tasks are really containers that are being brought up, right? But if you want to bring up a container, it needs to know, where will I pull the container image from? What am I going to, that's what we've just done, all right? So we've created it. The next thing we want to do is if we go back to the diagram, we're still on ECS. So now that we have a task definition, can we try to create a service? The Ghost service itself, we'll try. So what we can do is we'll go to cluster. Before you can create a service, you need an ECS cluster, which is in this case, a Docker orchestration service, okay? So we're going to create a cluster. We're just going to call I'll just call it web. I'll just say my cluster. Let's just, sometimes naming is hard, okay? Default, I'm going to leave that. Infrastructure, this is where you're thinking, do you want to go Fargate? I think I mentioned what Fargate is. Really, AWS is going to manage all the compute on the line layer for you. You can also do Fargate and manage instances, or Fargate and self-manage instances. We'll keep it to Fargate. Monitoring, we'll turn it off for now. Encryption, you can enable encryption if you want. I'm just going to create, okay? We're creating a cluster. It's in progress. CloudFormation is what it's going to use. So you can actually go to CloudFormation and see what it's creating. Sometimes I've seen cases where this fails. So you have to be able to check CloudFormation, see what's happening. If something is not going right, troubleshoot it, fix it. But in this case, good. Our task has been created. Our cluster has been created. You can see create complete. If you don't know, CloudFormation is also something you need to, I've talked about it in the past, but you can also refresh your knowledge of it. And sometimes we'll also do some things about it. So the cluster has been created. Now, inside of the cluster, we don't have any task. We don't have any service, right? We only have a task definition that we created. So the only way you can start using those task definition is to create a service, because a service will try to bring a task, and a task will use a task definition to bring itself up, okay? So the next thing we want to do, we want to create a service. And in this case, we're going to say what task definition is the service going to be using? The Ghost task definition that we created. There is this revision, which is 3, the latest. What's the name of the service? I'm going to keep it simple and say it's the Ghost service, right? This cluster is what it's going to be using. Capacity provider strategy is also something that is a bit advanced that I may just discuss at some point. But the point is that you can actually set different capacity type, set weights, and choose where you want more instances to be running and where you want, you just create weights more or less like because here you can see Fargate, you can also see Fargate spot. That the times where you want to balance your workload between running normal on-demand instances versus running spot. In this case, we're going to just keep the default, okay? The platform, we're going to use latest. Troubleshooting, we don't need. Replica is where you set replica, right? You can say, in this case, I just want one task for that service to be running. Here, we're going to use one. There are other things you can do, deployment option. This is a big deal at some point where you're thinking, are you going rolling updates, blue, green, canary, or linear? But in this case, we're going to keep it simple. We're just going to use like a rolling update, okay? We'll keep everything as default. Networking is where I'm passionate about because now this is really where we want to say, don't use the default VPC. We created a VPC. We want you to use that. So if you go back to Terraform and I open my cursor code, you see Terraform is done. We've actually installed the VPC. So a VPC is running there. So this is where we choose which VPC do we want to use. I have to use my own service VPC, right? And which subnets am I going to use? Now it's using all the subnets, but I really don't want my tasks to be in the public subnet. I want them to be in the private subnet. So this is where I'm going to get rid of the public. So remove public, and just leave all the private subnet because I want my task to run in private subnets, right? The next thing I want to do is what else? I think something we also did not do is we need to create a security group, right? We need to create a security group. So this is where I'm just going to call it, let me see a good name to call it. So I'm just going to do ECS security group in this case because we will need security. If you remember, if you go back to the diagram, that's why you need to have diagram because here, the ECS service itself is bounded by a security group, right? That just says what can get to it. So in this case, we are just going to allow for now everything that is inside the VPC. We'll trim that down as time goes on. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll create a security group. We'll say we want not all traffic, basically. We really want you to be able to get to the service using a particular port. So a TCP port. So let's see which of the port are we going to use. Custom TCP, right? So the port itself, we know it. It's going to be here, this particular port, right? Because that's where we're exposing. And then we're going to say from customize. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to the VPC. We'll go to the CIDR. We're going to change this later, but for now, let's just go to the VPC. We'll select the service VPC that we created. We're just going to copy the CIDR, right? And say, for now, we only want anyone that is inside that CIDR to be able to connect from this port, okay? So once we have that, this is like inbound rule, right? Create a new security group, ECS security group. We've created in ECS console. We don't want public IP. So this is also where we need to disable it. It's in the private subnet, so we don't want public IPs, right? So I'm just going to turn off the public IP. So we've done that. Service connect, we don't need. Service discovery, we don't need. Load balancing, we'll use load balancing at some point. But for now, let's just leave it at it. There's so many options you can. But for now, let's go with the basic things. The most important thing, no public IP. Secondly, put a security group. And thirdly, put it in private subnet, right? So once we have that, we'll create the, We'll create the service. So we'll refresh. Let's see. A service is going to be created. I think it uses CloudFormation. So if you refresh this place, you see a service is creating. So let's give it some time. Let's allow it to create and see. Let's see. If this goes well, that means the service has been created, right? So once the service has been created, at that point, it looks like we have a service, we have a task. It's going to use a task definition. So at that point, we've connected 3 things, right? All in a private subnet, right? So let's refresh and see. It's still creating. If I go back to service and refresh, it's there. So you can see the service is actually running. That's a good thing. I mean, it's trying to provision. So what about task? So a task is here. The service is here. Ghost is running. The task is here, running. But let's go into the task and see what's happening. The good thing about it is that you can see many things. You can see it's in a pending state. At some point, the desired state is actually to be running, but now it's in a pending state. The good thing is you can see the logs. That's like the most important place to see what's happening with my service. Is it working as expected? Right now, our service is not configured correctly, and it's done on purpose so that you can actually see how you can troubleshoot, fix things yourself. Right now, I know that when it runs, it's not going to work because we know that it needs a database to connect to. Right now, it doesn't have any. Okay, so let's see. But if we go back to the service, I think we should say create. Okay, maybe it's still doing create in progress, but let's see the logs for the service. Yeah, you can see at least it's doing fine. So it's not bad. It's trying to do something. So if you look at the logs, it's actually trying to do something. You say Ghost was running for a few seconds, the site is now offline, Ghost has shut down, and the reason is because connection refused. And if you look at it, it's actually, you will know that it's actually trying to go to a local host, right? It's going to 127.0.0.3306. That tells me it's trying to connect to a database, but it's failing. It's failing to connect to a database, which is intentional because I also want you to get used to the habit of being able to troubleshoot a service. So this is really what it is. Sometimes you're looking at the metrics, sometimes you're looking at the logs. Metrics is on the other end, but there is also logs that you can look at to tell you what is happening with the service. We can also view it in CloudWatch. So if you go to CloudWatch, you will see the same information, right? So your site is now offline because why? The problem is really here. Connection is refused. There is no database to connect to, okay? So we know that problem. So the next thing we want to do is we want to solve that problem, okay? And it goes back to our diagram. We know that for that container to run, we need a database to connect to, okay? So let's create a database. What we are going to do is we are going to go to Aurora, and then if we go to Aurora and RDS, before we can create a database, we need to create a subnet group, okay? So we're just going to do ECS, or let's say Ghost, no, we actually need to create a subnet group, and we'll call it Ghost private subnets group, okay? We'll do this. And then we'll say my private connection, right? Whatever you want to call it. But the most important thing, we'll use a particular VPC that we have. A subnet group just helps you say where do you want this database launched, right? So in this case, we want this particular service VPC, and the subnet will be, we need 2A, 2B, because that's really where I've launched them. The subnet is where I'm going to choose only private subnet. So here, I'll choose private, and I also choose private. Okay, take note. We don't want our database to be in the public subnet, right? So you can see service private and service private, 2A and 2B, okay? And that's really what we selected here in terms of like the subnet, 2A and 2B. Cool, we'll create that one. So we now have like a Ghost private subnet group, right? The next thing we want a database. We'll create a database. I've also taught database at some point, but this is us creating the database on the call and using it for a service, right? So in this case, we're going to choose which database do we want to connect to. Because I know Ghost needs MySQL, so I'm going to choose MySQL. But again, I'm going to use MySQL Aurora, okay? You can use normal MySQL, but you can also use Aurora, right? I'm just going to use the latest engine that is supported. I'm going to use dev test. I don't want to use production. I'll call it my Ghost. It's the cluster identifier in this case. Here is where I can do things like this username is basically admin, right? I can actually do admin here if I want to. In my own case, I'm not going to use self-managed. I'm going to use managed in AWS Secrets Manager. It's good. Sometimes you want AWS to manage the secret also for you for the database. I'm going to use that. And what I'm going to do here is to basically go down and do Aurora standard is fine for our use case. We're going to use serverless v2, okay? 0 here. And then I'm also going to do, what do you call it? I'm going to do, maybe I'm just going to use 1 here, okay? I think that's the minimum. I'm going to use from 0 to 1 so it can scale on our behalf. And then when I scroll down, what I want to also do is to say I don't need a replica because really it's a dev test environment. In this case, for production, maybe you want to create highly available database. But in this case, I'm just going to go, I don't need to connect to EC2 compute resource. I'm using IPv4. For default subnets, this is where I'm going to choose which subnet am I going to use. I'm going to be using which VPC. I'm going to choose my service VPC, okay? I'm not going to use the default VPC. We created a VPC for this. And this is where it's asking us for a DB subnet group. We created one, which is the Ghost private subnet group. The point is, use this VPC, but throw this database in a private subnet, which we have done, right? The next thing, you don't want to turn on public access, right? You don't want that. So it's turned off, no. And then we'll need a security group, right? So this security group is also very interesting because we this one, we'll have to create this one. So we'll go to EC2, I think this security group is inside EC2. So we'll go to EC2, and then we'll create a security group. This one, we'll just call it, it's very simple. We know what we're creating. So we'll just create DB security group, right? So do security group, create a security group, add a rule for inbound. We know the port. The port for database is 33. Is the database is trying to connect to is we saw the error, right? That port is what is it now? CloudWatch. We saw it is 3306, right? So we're just going to create a database, a security group that allows 3306. So custom TCP from where we want a security group, which is the one that is from the ECS. EC, are we in the right VPC now? Yeah, we're in the wrong VPC. Okay, these are some of the things you need to check. We need to be in the service VPC, right? So we're creating a service, a security group. This security group is DB security group, right? Security group. Okay. Remember, so allow connection to the database. Okay, cool. Database. And then we are going to be using a service VPC that we created. And then we're saying from this, we'll choose ECS. Remember, we created a security group that the task is going to use. So in this case, we are saying we only want the task to be able to reach the database, nothing else. All right. So we say allow ECS to connect to, sometimes it's good to be descriptive, to DB. Okay. We'll leave that. We just need that rule. We'll just create the security group. So once we have that security group, we'll go back to our database where we're trying to create. There is a ECS. That's the funny thing. I just wish AWS at this point. Okay, I think we can search. So let's search DB. It's not there. Oh, that's bad. We may have to refresh this page because it's not showing. Usually they'll have things like this where you can actually refresh and choose a security group, but in this case we don't have. So we created it before, and now it's we created it after, and now we can't see it. So, but what we can do is that let's refresh this page, and I'll just run through it this time. So I'm just going to do Aurora MySQL. MySQL in this case, the latest engine. It's a dev test. It's a Ghost. I call it Ghost DB, whatever. I just call it Ghost. Credential admin, secret manager can manage it for us. We said it's standard. We're using serverless v2. And then here we're just going to be using 1 as the minimum. And then the next thing we want to do is we don't connect. We said that before, the VPC, we want a particular VPC, which is the service VPC. And then here we want to do the private subnet that we've said before. For security group, we'll remove this and then we'll choose the security group we want. In this case, we want a DB security group. That's the one we want to use. Once we have that, what else? There are other things you can do, honestly, with database. You can have proxies, availability zone, no preference in this case. I don't really have any preference, but you can have other things like proxy, read replica. You can do all that, but we don't. We'll use database insight, the basic one. We'll just keep everything as default monitoring, everything. You can set up some logs to see what's happening with the database, but I'm just going to create the database, right? This is going to take some time. So let's give it some time to create. Here we're creating a serverless database. The point is that the database is going to be brought up based on load, right? So usage is going to determine how, in some use case it works. Some use case, you have to think about your use case. It's there if you want to, like in this case, we're exploring. I don't really need to create. I can use serverless, but sometimes some workloads are not ideal for serverless, okay? Some workloads are ideal for serverless. In this case, we're just using serverless for our test, okay? So we're creating that database connection. The cluster itself is available. That's what it tells us. You can see we now have an endpoint, right? So we have an endpoint. It shows us a secret that we can use. So it tells us if we do this, we can try to connect, right? So we'll just give it some time. There's some other things that we might need to do. So let's give it some time for this is the cluster itself has been created, but the instance is being created, is creating. So let's give it some time. Let's take a break, go back to our diagram and see how much progress we are making. So we've created a task definition. We created a service. The service tried to bring up a task. The task currently is failing. And the reason we've seen, it doesn't have connection to a database. So on the other end, we're trying to create a database that is on the rightmost part of things, right? But remember, that database is also in a private subnet. And we've also set up something that ensures that only the ECS security group can connect to the database. So there's a DB security group, and we've said only an ECS security group can connect. So nothing else can connect to the database unless you are an ECS task. Okay, cool. And then we said Aurora, when you create, use secrets manager to keep your secret. Okay, which is fine. So to some extent, we have this part set up, right? We have this part set up. But again, I didn't want to go to the ALB part because sometimes I really want to show you how when you set up an ECS service, you should be able to test it yourself before even throwing a load balancer at it. You should be able to test it. You should be able to you should be able to troubleshoot it yourself. You should be able to go to that service and see. So load balancer would always work if the service itself is working well. Load balancer is always going to work. So sometimes it's also good test your service in isolation. Make sure the service is working. Troubleshoot it. Like in our case, we were able to check the logs. We saw that it couldn't connect to the database. Now that we're adding the database, what will change? Is it going to be better? And then if we can, confirm that the service itself is working, then we can plug that to a load balancer. Okay, and that's why when you draw a diagram like this, it's easy for you to see what can stay in isolation, what needs to be connected to the other thing. We can see that the ALB on its own is just there. We don't really, at some point, now we don't really need it. We can actually play with the service on its own, okay? So let's go back to the database. It's still creating. We're still going to give it time because the writer instance here that has 0 to 1 ACUs is still creating. So I'm not entirely sure if we point a task to it now it will work as expected. We just need to give it time to start, to create properly. But again, what we can also do, we can start creating a load balancer. I mean, we can create it. We may not use it just now, just so that we can buy time for ourselves. So what we'll do is that let's go back to the diagram and see some of the other things we need. Let me try and zoom in a bit. We know that we need a load balancer, okay? So we're just going to create a load balancer. So let's go and create an ALB. I think we can do that from EC2, right? So we'll go load balancer. We'll create a load balancer. Remember, there are different kinds of load balancer, application, network, gateway. I've discussed these things also in some of my previous classes here on TikTok, right? Telling you the difference. I think we've used network load balancer. We've used application load balancer. Yeah, gateway load balancer. I've talked about all these things in the past, but we can always visit them. It depends on the model we are trading. But in this case, we're going to create an application load balancer that's really suited for what we want to do. So we're going to call it maybe Ghost. I'll just call it Ghost ALB. I mean, that's really what I feel like calling it because it's going to serve But again, honestly, remember, Ghost in this case is one service we're exposing to the ALB. But sometimes an ALB can forward traffic to multiple services at the same time. Maybe slash Ghost is the Ghost service. Maybe slash API is something else. Slash Webhooks, you can do all that. But in this case, I'm just naming it. Or just to be more clear, I'll just say my ALB, right? The ECS. I'll call it my ALB because ALBs are meant to be very generic. You can use them for many things, okay? IPv4 is what we want. VPC is really always paying attention. Sometimes it wants to create it in the default VPC, but we actually want a service VPC. We've created that. In the past, we'll use this. We'll use 2B, 2A, and 2B. And here's where we are saying, where do you want it? We want it in a public subnet. That's what we see in the diagram, right? We want the load balancer itself to be deployed in the public subnet. So, and then here also, this is private. So sometimes you have to verify those things, right? Because this one I did at first, it was pointing to private. So you have to check. This one is public. This one is public. Okay. Just make sure you have all that checked out. This is where we now need another security group again, right? So we have to create an ALB security group, right? So if you think about it, we now have like how many security groups? DB security group, ECS security group. We need a load balancer security group. So we'll create, in this case, I'm going to do ALB SG, okay? Security group, just to be more specific. So allow traffic to the ALB, okay? And then in the VPC, I'm going to use the service VPC inbound rule. For now, I'm just going to allow all traffic for now, but I'm going to tune that down. So I'll just say temp, okay? Temp rule, okay? I'm gonna prune that down. But yeah, it depends on who you're exposing the traffic to. You want it to get to the internet, you have to allow everyone. But if you're tying it down to your own IP address, you have to limit it further. And here, outbound rule, I'm just going to leave everything as is. I'm going to create a security group. Cool. So we now have an ALB security group. So in the point of creating a load balancer, it needs a security group. So I'm going to refresh this, remove the defaults. I'll use the ALB security group that we just created. The listener is where it becomes interesting because you need the listener in terms of like, on which port are people going to like interact with your load balancer. In this case, I'm going to say port 80. And here I can say 4 target groups. Really, there's no target group. I'm just leaving everything as is, I can create a target group, but I don't have any for now. Let me even see if it's going to allow me create it. I suspect it may tell me I need a target group. Okay, so let's create a target group. So we'll create a target group. We'll just say, let's go and create a target group. Okay, so this is the good thing about, you can create target. Remember, you can also create target groups in isolation. Target groups can live on their own. So this is really where I'll be specific here. I'll say ghost target group, because the instances that I want to come here are for ghost, like that. They are for the ghost CMS, right? The ghost container. So here I'm saying the ghost target group, let them come here. The port will be HTTP. The port for the target group, remember, you have to go back to the container because we're exposing it on port 2368. So we're going to come back here and say we want where were we just now? We were here trying to create a target group. So that's the port. IPv4 is fine. The service VPC, yes. HTTP, fine. The protocol is also health check on the same port. We'll leave it as that. We want you to go to the home page. We also want you to do things like maybe the healthy threshold. I don't need, maybe I just use 2 so that the health check can pass quickly. We can also, the timeout can be 2. In this case, I'm keeping it very minimal, right? So we can use the minimum value. Here we want to make it 200, right? Let's see if we can create this. This is where it's asking us for us to put in IPs or tell us which IPs are going to be part of the target group. But here we cannot specify anything because the ECS is going to fill that target group for us. In this case, we can leave it empty. Okay, so we're just going to do next, and then we'll create that target group. So we now have a ghost target group. Don't worry, it's currently healthy, is none, unhealthy is good. So the next thing we want to do is we actually want to go back to where we're creating a load balancer. Yes, the load balancer. We'll refresh. We'll choose that target group that we created. We'll remove this one. Right now, all the traffic should go there. 100% of the traffic should go to anything that is coming to /80 of the load balancer should go to the ghost target group. Every other thing we can keep as is. There are many more things you can use. Global accelerator, firewall. You can do all that. They're all there for you to specify. But I'm going to create the load balancer. So now that the load balancer is creating, let's look at our diagram and see what we have done. We've created a load balancer. We've also created a target group for Ghost, but we've not really connected our target group to an ECS service yet. But we've connected the target group to a load balancer. So it means from a load balancer to a target group, that connection is solid. But right now, the target group will not have any IP addresses because that target group has to be connected to an ECS service for it to populate the IP address that needs to receive traffic. Okay, cool. Let's go back to ECS. Remember, we're trying to do something with, we're trying to create a database for ECS to be able to connect to. So let's see how that database is doing. Let's refresh. Let's see. Usually these databases are always the longest to create. It's still modifying, but it looks like at this point, I think it looks like it's fine, but we still need to make sure it's clean. Okay, we can't really do much. So let's leave it. It's still modifying. I'm not sure what it's doing now. But at least it's even showing the CPU usage %. Yeah, it's available. Cool. So we were right here on time. So the next thing we want to do is let's create a database connection. Okay. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to open, let me see if I can actually find something. Let me do if I can find a sticky and just bring this here. Let me look for this and just paste it in a sticky so that you see. Okay. So what I've done is, I'm not sure what's going on now. Let me see. Where is my screen? Okay, cool. Let me look for the sticky I was working with just now. Let me see sticky. Let me move this. Let me move this here and try to expand it a bit so that you see what we need. Okay, I think this is clear enough. Can you guys see my screen? This one. Let me try and zoom the sticky and see if you can see it. There's no way to zoom this. Let's see. Okay, cool. So what I've done is I've taken whatever is there. You will see that this is the port, right? So it needs this port to connect. But the things I really need you to pay attention to, let's forget about these other ones. You can do all these ones later if you want to take it further. But the most important thing is I know, and again, this is not from me. I basically know it's from the website, right? There is like a client, a connection host, a user, a password, and a database. So let's try. Let's start creating those things. So what we'll do is that we'll go back to the service that we've created before, right? And then we'll modify it. We'll modify that service. In this case, we actually will go back to ECS. And then you see, I think this one failed. The service actually failed, which is fine because we know what the issue is. So we'll go to ECS here, and then we'll go to container service. We'll go to the task definition, right? So we'll go back to ghost task definition, and then we'll create a new revision, right? The thing is that we know the first revision is not working. We saw it in the logs. It's failing to connect to the database. This is where you need to fix it. Fix the revision, fix it, create it as a new revision, and then try it again. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the environment variable. We saw what it needs. It needs a client, at least a DB client, right? So we'll go here and say task definition. We need this. The value is basically going to be, I think this is because my page is a bit, yeah, so we can make it fit on one line. So database clients, the value is from this, that's fine. The database host, we'll use, what is it? So we'll add a new environment variable. We'll say the host, the value is, this is where we are going to copy whatever is in the database, right? So if you think about connectivity, they already gave us a database instance here, connection. So we're going to pick, you can see this is the host. This is the MySQL host, right? So we'll do this, we'll copy it, right? So when we copy it, we'll go back to the task definition, we'll say the database connection, we'll paste the value. We'll add a new environment variable. What's that variable? The variable is the user. We're going to go here and say task manager. We'll go to user. We'll say the value is from secret manager, okay? And I can actually share the secret with you on this call. And the reason is because that database is private database. So even if you're trying to connect wherever you are right now, you can't. The point is that I'm going to show you, because it's managed from AWS for us. So it's here. You can see the username is admin, the password is admin. The containers can actually look at the secret and fetch the right value for you. You don't have to manually paste them, okay? So even as part of your growth, where you're learning, these are some of the best practices you need to learn. Understanding, secrets are meant to be in Secrets Manager, but you can read them from your containers if you want to by connecting them to Secret Manager. So in this case, I'm going to look for the ARN of this secret. So I'm going to copy it. This is the ARN. Copy the ARN. I'll come here. I'll paste that ARN here because I'm saying from secret. I'll paste it. The only thing I need to do extra is just the fact that once you copy the secret and you paste it, I think, let me see, account ID, secret, blah, blah, blah. Let me do end, sorry. So the only thing you need to do is when you paste it, you can actually, there's something in Secrets Manager where you can do this, okay? The first one is basically you can specify the name that you're trying to reference. There's also what should be in the third column, which is like, I think it's the secret version. And then I think there is really namings for these things, but what should be in the middle is basically the key. If that secret has like key value pairs, you can actually say, in this case, I want it to be the username, right? The username. But if you check, there is also, you can also say the version that you can use. And then I think here you can actually put the specific ID of that particular secret you're making reference to. But in this case, I want that secret, but I want the username of the secret. And because that is tying to the user, right? So let's also add a new environment variable. This is where sometimes you have to be careful because any little mistake will make the task not to run, okay? So the next one I want to do is go back and search for the password. Here, I'm going to go to the password, I'll paste it here, and I'll say the value is from this, and the secret is also the secret we've copied before. I'll copy it here, go back to the task definition, paste it here, and then I'll do, I think I'll do this, and then what I'll do is I'll paste the password, okay? I'll put password here, and then I'll put, let me just go back to the end and do password, okay? Just the way we did it before. So it's standard stuff, paste password here. It has a space, I have to remove it. So if you notice 3 semicolons, here there's something you can put, here there's something you can put, okay? It just depends on your use case. So I think one more thing is, we need one more thing, and that's the database itself, right? So we're going to paste this, and then we'll say, it's just a normal value. We'll say ghost, okay? Fine, we've created this revision. I think the revision is 3. We'll create it. So that's a new revision being created. So we've created a new revision. So now that we have a new revision, I think this is revision 4. What can we do? Let's go back to the service and try to run it again and see if we are lucky this time. So we'll go back to the service. We'll go here. This is the service. We'll say update the service. We'll choose the latest revision that we just adjusted the task definition. We're saying the first task definition we used, there's something faulty about it. We didn't really put the credentials correctly because we saw the error in the logs. We saw it in CloudWatch. Now we fixed it. Can we, force a new deployment again? and see how it goes. So we'll update, and then we'll see what's going on. So I think it's pending now. Let's see what's happening. So task, there is this one that has exited. Let's see if there is one that is stopped. Is anyone trying to run? Let's go actually to update, force a new deployment, and just update and see what happens. So desired state 0 is pending, in progress. So that's the good news. So the service is in progress now. Let's see what happens. So if you check the task, it's trying to bring up a new task. I think so. So let's try and see what goes. Let's see service. The test service is here. Replica, one test is 0, is running. Let's see. This one is stopped. Those ones are all stopped. Which of the service? Yeah, pending. Sometimes these things can be, but you just need to, the UI sometimes can be tricky, but you can see one task is trying to come up. That's the one that is using the 4th revision that we just created, right? So you can also check the definition, check things. You see it's using this revision that we just created. This is the private IP, blah, blah, blah. And what else? Let's see the logs. No logs yet. It's going to give it time for the container to boot up, start loading the service, pull the service from Docker Hub, start loading it, it will pull the container from Docker Hub, and then it will start to run that container. So it will take some time for the logs to start showing up. But once the logs start showing up, we'll see if we've made progress on where we're coming from. So let's go back to the diagram. Let's see what we've done. So to some extent, I think we've connected the ECS to Aurora, task definition, all that to the database. We created a database, connected it to a secret. So I think this part should be good to go, right? We just need to wait for it to come to life. And then if it's good, we can test it in isolation. Then we can plug it to a load balancer, okay? And there's a reason why you need to understand it this way. It just begins to help you understand the things that can stay in isolation. Load balancer, target group would always be together, but ECS on its own can be there. You can test ECS in isolation, and if it's working well, you can tie it back to a load balancer, right? So let's go back to the task definition and see it exited. I'm not sure what it is, but let's check the logs. It looks like your site is now available. Invalid database host, right? So that's really the problem. In this case, it actually tried to connect to the database, but it says the host was the problem, right? So it said invalid database host. Let's see what the problem is. So the good thing is that you can always look at the logs and see what's happening with the logs. So let's go back to the task definition. Let's see this one. Let's create a new revision and see what that host value is. Let me see, which one is this? This is database. This is what? This is the host. I thought this is correct. Where did we get the host value from? Let's check the database. Let's see. Oh, I think, let's see. Yeah, we should be connecting to, let me see, connectivity. Let's connect to the cluster. Let's go back to the task definition again and update the connection. I changed that back to I think the host I was using before is the wrong one. So I've fixed it. It's now revision 5. Let's go back to the service and try to, let's go back to the cluster, go back to the service and try to force a new deployment. So we're just going to go to the service and then we'll update the service. This time we'll just force a new deployment. We'll use the latest revision and then we'll just do updates. Okay. Let's hope we'll be lucky again this time, okay? But again, honestly, these things, that's why you test. It's not always straightforward. Sometimes maybe you typo, but it's good for you to know the flow. See where you're to check. Sometimes this is like known. Sometimes also it could be, maybe you're trying to, there's a place where we specify the memory, the CPU. Sometimes if you specify lower CPU than is needed by the port, sometimes, or lower memory, for example, the machine can, the service might not come up. You might say out of memory, it doesn't have enough memory. So you just have to be able to play around the environment and see when you're trying to start something, what are the possible issues that might happen, right? So in this case, we've seen from the logs, it's pretty much straightforward. Now it says 1 is running. I'm not sure, but let's see this one that is pending. Let's check the logs. Let's see if there's anything in the logs. No logs yet. That one, it said it was the host that was wrong. So let's see if this time we get it correctly. Okay, so let's refresh. Let's go back to the service. It says 1 is active. Not sure. One task is running, 1 in progress. I'm not sure what it means, but let's see. Let's check the logs. Perfect. We're making progress at this point because you can see we gave it the correct stuff. It's creating table, collections, milestones, mentions, blah blah blah. It's creating a number of things, and it's not failing, right? So that means to some extent we've created a good connection. We've created an ECS task that can talk to a database, all secure. But now you can see that the connection is actually going through, and the service after a while will be running. So let's actually refresh. You can also view it in CloudWatch. You can go to CloudWatch and see the logs. You can tail it. These are all features you can start tailing and see, but you can also scroll to the end and see what's happening. So far, it's good. You can see. I'm sure maybe some of these things are health check, right? Maybe just health check to. There are some failures here, but it's fine. It's fine. If you remember, we didn't use EFS. We didn't use any mount points. Ideally, we're supposed to set up like a mount point for many of the assets that we're going to be using to be stored. But right now, we're not really doing that. But if I look at everything that is working, it looks like, yeah. Although I'm seeing error code here, but maybe that's just, I'm not sure what's going, invalid database host. Are these new or what? Or this is like old one or what now? Your site is now offline. Explore response code, Ghost is shutting down. Ghost database is this. It's in a ready state. So why is it complaining if all this passed? Or maybe those are just logs that are confused or what? Let me see. But it says the type. Okay, maybe, who knows? Maybe that's just a combination of logs. But let me see these logs. This particular one, this last one. Let me go to this. Is this the old one? This is the first. Let's see the latest. 1645, 1642. Okay, cool. I think we have to look at it. You can see the most important thing is it was running. It's now shut down. This is interesting. What's happening? Yeah, let's see. Let's actually test the service and see what's happening. We'll go here. It looks like it's actually running. So we can test it. How do we do that? We'll go to Cloud Shell. One thing you need to take note of is deployment is still in progress. But from what I'm seeing, this deployment doesn't look like it's going to work. 0 pending, 1 running. But it still says deployment is in progress. Let's see the deployments. They're all pending. So view task. This is running, it's running. And then let's see inside and see the logs. It says it's running, but I'm not now sure. Yeah, your site is running. Maybe the logs is just, we're just looking at a number of logs. But the most important thing is that it says Ghost is running in production, right? These are all some of the things that you can see. It shows what database in the ready state, your site is running. How do we test? You can see it says localhost, right? Localhost 2368. Yes, I think some are actually old logs. Some are old logs, but we've seen the latest logs and we can see it's actually running. The thing is that you don't need a load balancer at this point to test. You can test your service in isolation. Why? The reason is because if you go to services, my cluster, there is a security group that we're using. So if you go to the service, you go to where we created, if you go to, I think it's under configuration and networking. If you check, there is a security group we're using. And this security group for now allows traffic from the VPC, right? So what it means is that we can actually test this service in isolation. What we can do is that we can actually go to Cloud Shell. We'll go to Cloud Shell. So let's test our service first and make sure it's working before we try to expose it to the load balancer. But at this point, honestly, I know that if we just, maybe I'm showing you a trick also, right? So you can create one that is in the VPC. We can say service VPC, put it inside of, inside the service. Or in fact, let's just throw it to the load balancer, okay? Let's not do this step. Let's throw it to the load balancer because we've seen that the service is working. So what we can now do is that we can go to the service itself. So we go to the target group, the service. What we can do is we can go to the services. We'll go to this service and then we'll update the service, okay? Remember there were some things we skipped. Like we skipped a load balancer at some point, right? This is where we want to tell it we need a load balancer now. So what we can do is we can say we need a load balancer. What's happening? Update the service, use a load balancer. Where is you? Where is the load balancer part of things? Let's see, load balancer, use a load balancer, add a load balancer. In this case, we're going to be using my ALB that we created. The VPC is this one, this particular VPC that we have. It's an application load balancer. This is the container we want to serve. The listener is the one that is on port 80. The target group, it should be the ghost target group, right? So just think about it as this is the last place where we are doing the connectivity. We're basically connecting the target group from our diagram. If you see our diagram, we have ECS that is working on its own. We have a target group. We've just not connected it. And now we're just doing that final connection that we said, please, this should be served from the ALB, right? So what we can do is we can go back and do, we can go here and say, this is the target group, and then just update the service. So we've updated the service. The service now has a load balancer attached to it. How do we know? If we go back to a load balancer, so if we go load balancer, and we go to target groups, if we go to target groups, you find this target group. What you now need to do is just keep an eye on the target, right? The target here, because if you refresh it, at some point, it's going to add a target from the ECS into the load balancer, okay? So let's see if that is happening. We've updated the service. Let's see if it's doing a new deployment or something. Yeah, one is pending, right? Because we just attach it to a load balancer. So if we give it some time, it's going to actually deploy itself into a load balancer, right? So let's go back to the load balancer that we're looking at. I think it's here, target group, refresh. Let's give it some time. Let's give it some time. So if you go back to your diagram, there is a load balancer. A load balancer will have a target group. A target group would have what kind of target group? And in this case, we're just using ECS to fill that target group for us, right? So I can see that from the service, it's bringing up a new instance that is pending. So we need to give it time. When that instance becomes available, it's basically going to appear here, okay? So let's give it some time. One is pending. So let's see the task. There's one that is running. This one is activating. This is the latest one, 1 minute ago. So if we go back to the target group and we refresh, yeah, you can see. I didn't even have to do anything, right? So instead of going through Cloud Shell or doing anything, you can see immediately appeared here. It's healthy. You can see the connection is correct, right? So it's healthy immediately. It did all the health check, blah, 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 and that's it. The point is that, what do you think is going to happen? We've come to like a very good step to test. So if we go here and we pick this, we can basically just test and do this. We can test. Boom, we're live, right? So that's the point. We've been able to link the ECS service back to a load balancer, and it's live. I think right now it's here. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to go to the load balancer. Basically, I'm going to go to security group here, and I think this is the ALB security group. So what I'm just going to do is offline, I'm just going to create something else. So offline, I'm just going to edit the security group to only allow connection from my IP address, okay? Just so that I can show you more things. So I'm just going to edit the inbound rule. At this point, I'm just trying to edit the inbound rule to use my IP, okay? And I don't want to share my IP address. So I'm just going to save the rule, okay? But if I go back to this URL, it's still going to work. I've just changed it so that no one can connect to this, but it's still going to work. I just changed it behind the scene. I changed it to my IP address. So right now it's still here. But the thing is that really there's like an endpoint I can go here, but it's working. It's basically working, right? So I can just do test, testing. Just do this. I'll just paste an email. Just do test at. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to paste this. I'm just going to paste the password. No, maybe I'll type it. Maybe I'll type the password so I can remember, right? So let's see. Let's see if it's going to work. But yeah, it's live. You can see we're live. We're basically here. I can start creating a post, right? I can do a post. But you can see we just took something that is on Docker Hub, right? And in just a couple of, it took us some time, but at least we've hosted it. Like we just hosted it right now on we've hosted it. So let's go back to our diagram. What did we really do? What did we achieve? We started from explaining exactly what ECS is. What are the building blocks of ECS? It's a service. It brings up task. This task, the last one that was brought up, was added to the load balancer, right? So that's a task. But the task, we need the task definition. So that's where we're doing all the things like changing the ports that we're using, changing the secrets that we're going to be using, the database we're connecting to. All that happened in the task definition. And then, once we're done with ECS, we connected it to a database. at some point, that task was attached to a load balancer through the idea of target groups, right? And that target groups, we saw that it's there. We can't do the other things on this call, but what is next? It's not done. You can do many more things, right? You can have things like right now, because I'm still using the load balancer endpoint is here, right? So the load balancer endpoint is here, but I can do more things. I can basically go back and, connect this to CloudFront distribution, because a blog is made up of both static and non-static content, right? So maybe the non-static content is what is loaded from load balancer, but I also want to have, maybe both are loaded from the load balancer, but I also want to get that caching at the edge. So we can have a CDN that does that for us. So static content can be cached on our behalf, right? So that every time you're not going back to the origin to fetch those things. And if you have like a custom domain, this way you need like a certificate manager. So, you have a domain, you buy a certificate for it. You have that certificate both on the CloudFront and on the, on the load balancer. Once that is in place, you also know that at some point you need to secure your CloudFront. You can put a WAF in front of it. I'm just adding this so that whoever is on this call, you've seen me build this, you want to try it yourself. These are the things that really helps you say, I can build on AWS, right? These are the things that once you start architecting them, you start seeing these decisions, you can start doing a lot of things in terms of around security, around scale. Right now we're using Docker Hub here, right? I'm using Docker Hub here. But you can also take that image and put it in ECR. And instead of Docker Hub, you can basically take ECR and use. So by then that becomes something that is inside your account, right? So instead of you going to reach out to Docker Hub, you can actually go here. And one thing you can even use here, remember, this one is one of the reasons why we have a NAT gateway, because we have to go to the internet from a private subnet, right? So when you're learning those things, understand why. When you're trying to pull the container, you're pulling it from the internet. But I can completely cut off connection to the internet and use interface endpoints and just use ECR, right, as the block. So put my container in ECR, yank off the internet connectivity if I don't need it, and just be able to fetch it from ECR. So, but honestly, we can't cover everything today. Like we can't cover everything. So if you just continue to join me in some of these series, I'll be showing you many tricks in AWS and how to build and architect resilient architectures. Not really whatever I try to do, I try to show you best practice. I also don't show you this is how to do it. Rather, I teach you how to think about solving problems. I can as well just build this thing without drawing any diagram, but I'm also trying to show you a large picture, showing you that if you can draw it, you kind of understand the components, the moving parts. It's easy for you to connect them together. It's easy for you to know what should be talking to what could be missing, right? It's easy for you to know where permission can go wrong. It's easy for you to know what are the things I'm lacking. So just know that in this class, I think we did everything that is in the VPC. We didn't really go through CloudFront, Certificate Manager, WAF, but honestly, those things are easy to incorporate if you want to. I think I've taught CloudFront, although in CloudFront we use S3 as an origin, but here you can connect CloudFront to ALB as an origin. Okay, so we've done a lot. We've done a lot on this call. If you check, our site is running, it's working as expected. We just now need to tear down, right? So let's go back and tear down. I'm going to be tearing everything. First of all, we'll start from the ECS, right? Because that's like if you check the diagram, that's like the thing that is towards the left, towards the rightmost that is using the database. So I'll start from tearing down ECS, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll start from just going to the service, just going to pretty much delete the service, right? So delete service, first delete. So that's where we'll start from. Delete the service. It's no longer going to be available. It's going to take time, but it's going to do its thing. It's going to stop the task. It's going to delete everything, and the service is going to go. And then we'll go to task definition. Let's see if we can actually delete the. No, we can't actually deregister the task. So we'll do all this one, and then we'll just deregister them. So we'll just deregister the task. The task is gone. Let's see what else is here. Let me actually delete the cluster. We don't need it again. Delete cluster. So we'll start from ECS. Delete. Let's see what it's going to delete. Remember, some of these things were created in CloudFormation. Let's see if we can find that stack. But if you refresh, you see the service is deleting, the cluster is deleting. Also, you need to pay attention sometimes to CloudFormation. So we can do all that. We delete the cluster, it's deleting. Yeah, it's done. Let's go back to task definition and see. The task definition is also gone. The cluster is gone. So we're done with deleting ECS. So if everything we built for ECS, we've let it go. The next thing we want to do is delete our database. We don't need it again. So we basically will go to databases. We'll do the cluster. we'll just do, I think there is a place here to, we don't need it again, right? So we're just going to delete, let's see, it doesn't really, I think, let me go in. Let me see, delete. Usually I think we'll need to delete the, type delete me. Is it delete me? It wants me. So I'm just going to delete the, what do you call it? The instance. Once the instance is deleting, I'm just going to delete the cluster. It's going to ask me for create a final snapshot, retain automated backup, create a final snapshot, type delete me. I'm also going to type that, and then I'm going to delete the DB cluster, right? So the DB cluster is going to delete. It's going to take time, just the way it took time for it to create. It's going to take time to delete because it's going to create one final snapshot here. So you can see this snapshot was created just now, right? So it's creating. The whole idea is, in case you said, I didn't know when I deleted the database, you can always, rebuild your database from a snapshot. So it's going to create a final snapshot for us. But there are many things you can do with the RDS. You can export your snapshot to S3. You can see them here. You can pretty much bring back your snapshot to your database, but it's fine. Let's just give it time. Yeah, it's going to back it up. Yeah, it's going to delete. Okay. Once that is in place, what else can we let go? So let's look at the diagram. Can we go and delete the load balancer? Yeah, we can actually. The load balancer is actually on its own. So we'll go to target group. We'll go to, let's actually delete the load balancer first. So we'll delete this. We'll delete the load balancer. We'll do confirm. So we'll delete this. We'll delete the load balancer. It's deleting. Well, target group, we created that in as target groups can stay on their own without a load balancer. So we are going to also delete the target group. Good. So it's gone. We've deleted everything ALB, everything ECS. DB is deleting on its own end. What else? We created a number of IAM. If you remember, guys, we created a number of IAM roles. So we're just going to check them and delete them. Maybe if you want to use them later, you can. But I'm going to look for last activity. Let me see. I think we did some for ECS. We created these two. I'm going to get rid of them. So I'm just going to delete. We could use them if we wanted to use them some other time. The next thing we want to do is we want to check security groups. Security groups. Now, I'm sure if you go back to this website and you load it, it's not going to work again because whatever is loading it is gone. So it's fine. So we're just going to go to security groups. Those security groups might not let us delete them because it's being used. But let's see if we can get rid of them. So we'll go to security group, the ones we created. We created a number of them for this VPC. So ALB security group. So ALB security group can go, DB security group, ECS security group. I think these two can go for now. I'm not sure the other one can go. Even this one is saying it has some network interface associated with it. So I'm not sure which one, but let's also do this one and delete security groups. Yeah, some of them will not allow us to delete it because some things are still getting deleted. So let's give it some time. Our database is gone, so we've been able to delete the database at this point. So that means some of the security groups we're trying to delete before should be good to go. So let's try it again. So we're going to check ALB, ECS, and try to just delete and see if we make progress. It looks like it says delete. I'm just going to enter delete and see. Only 2 of them were deleted. The ECS is still pending. I'm not sure why. Maybe give it one more attempt. And now it's allowing me to delete it. So it's gone. So I think at this point, honestly, if I think about the things we've created, we've deleted the ECS cluster, we've deleted ALB, the target group, we've deleted the database and the snap. Okay, now we need to delete the snapshot now that I think about it. So if there's a snapshot that was taken for us, in case it was a mistake you did when you were deleting the database, you can always bring back the snapshot. But I know it wasn't a mistake. I did it on purpose. I'm going to let it go. So the snapshot has been deleted. And once that is gone, I need to go back to my infra as code guy and just do Terraform destroy. So that it's going to destroy the NAT gateway, the VPC, the subnets, and all the things it created for me. So it's going to be deleted. And once this is deleted, we can say the lab is completely done, right? Yeah, it's done. Cool. So the VPC is done. That's why I love IAC. So just so you know, IAC is really good for you to, easily bring up stuff and bring them down. You don't have to go through the manual step. But again, I still mix. If you follow me on all front, I mix all of them. Like sometimes I'm showing things via the console. Sometimes I'm actually showing you. You can also use IAC to bring them up. Cool. That brings us to the lab itself. So just a recap. we didn't really go through CloudFront. One way is to have CloudFront bring the traffic. We stopped here. So everything inside here we built. ECR is just here in case you want to swap Docker Hub for ECR, you can. Certificate manager, if you have like a custom domain, you can. You can also use it for CloudFront. And then WAF, web application firewall, right? Those are all that security benefits you can add on top of your infra. Cool. That brings us to the end of the build session.